Author Donna Jodhan presents The Motorcycle Murder. It was a wonderful time of the year. Exams were over and summer was here. Everyone was in such a joyous mood. The carefree days were here, and it was time to party. Almost everyone knew that this would probably be the last time that the class of 2004 would have the chance to be together. The prom would be taking place in a few days. Oh boy, excitement all around. But no one could have foreseen the terrible event that took place before the actual prom. Even today, those close to the event still wonder why it had to happen like this.
Hello, hello, hello! It's Detective DJ, and welcome to our show. This week, or today, I'm happy to bring you another episode of our Season 3, and this is called The Motorcycle Murder. I know that by now you would have heard the description, but before delving into the episode and getting you all interested and excited, I just want to make sure that everyone is doing just fine. I hope that you are having a great day. I hope that you have been having a great week. And again, thank you for listening into my episodes. So, I want to introduce you to my team once more. We have Dr. Shea Harrington, who is our resident psychologist. We have Chip Sanderson, who is our investigator and my right-hand man. We have Dr. Nicholas Gasquet, who is our resident pathologist. Dr. Ryan Martini, who is our resident crime scene specialist. And of course, Alex Kirchhoff. He is our resident guru, our whiz kid, and very, very handy around the computer. We're awfully lucky to have all of these members as part of our team, and everyone is just willing, ready, and dying to go. So, without much more ado, let's go into this week's episode, or today's episode. It's called The Motorcycle Murder. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Well, let's see what we got today. And we're going to start here talking about moments before the crime takes place. It is indeed a typical afternoon in early June. Sort of a spring-like afternoon, but maybe with a tinge of summer. And summer is definitely in the air, and school is over. And over it is until September, right after Labor Day. A cool breeze is stirring the leaves in the very green trees. And the flowers are dancing gracefully on their stems. In the schoolyard, the teacher is bidding goodbye to their students. And everyone is happy, but then again just a wee bit sad to be leaving each other. On the banks of a quiet river, two young boys are quietly chatting. Dr. Ryan Martini has been called to a crime scene, and what else is new? The crowd is silent as the cops arrive. And the crowd is made up mainly of teens, but there are also some parents as well. And an uncanny hush seems to have settled over the gathering. Dew has already started to settle on the grass and on the leaves, glistening dewdrops. What a pretty sight. And the insect world is already out in full force. This is a somewhat secluded spot, and the cops have asked the crowd to step back, and they have willingly obliged. Some of the crowd, and many of them being youngsters, seem rooted to the ground as they are in total shock. Others are crying silently, while some of the parents present are holding on to their own kids. The cops are shining their torches on the bodies of two young people. One is a male and one is a female. The male is wearing a flowered shirt and white slacks, and the female is wearing a bright red party dress. Their bodies are lying on top of a grassy bank, and they're both dead. Not too far from the bodies lies a motorcycle, and this motorcycle is a total wreck. A light pole has been severely damaged, and this lies at the side of the road. Now, the cops must start the gruesome task of identifying these two young people. But there are a few in the crowd who already seem to know who these youngsters are. Well, now, Dr. Shea steps in, and she is going to give you a few of her thoughts as to what is going on. She's saying that this is the perfect location chosen by the killer, and that being that it was a secluded spot. And the perfect occasion, according to Dr. Shea, who loves to pontificate, was that it was a teen's party, and the victim's reason for having been there, according to Dr. Shea, is that they were attendees at this party. Alright, so let's go on now and talk about the motives as thought of by our friend Chip. Was teen rage involved? Was teen jealousy involved? Or was it maybe an accident? Well, Shea has put together a profile of the suspect, and here's what she has come up with. The suspect may have wanted revenge because of some sort of jealousy. But did they intend to go this far? Did they intend to have it end in murder? Or did they just want to teach the victims a lesson? Don't know. But let's see what Chip Sanderson, our investigator, has to say. Ryan Halliday and Kirsten Seaman had both been attending an end-of-year party. They had gone to the party together and had been seen by others for most of the night. They were chatting, eating, dancing, and mingling. Sounds so far so good. Now, both Ryan and Kirsten were extremely popular among their peers, and they had recently started to date. Things had seemed to be getting serious between these two young people, but they both knew that come the fall, they would be going off to separate colleges. This, however, did not seem to be a problem for Ryan and Kirsten, as they had told several of their friends that they would both try to make things work for them. There were supposed to have been over 300 attendees, and the party had been organized by both parents and students from two neighboring schools. But the students were mainly made up of high school graduates, and the party was to have been held in a football field. Tents were to serve as shelters in case of rain, and there was lots of food, beverage, and music. No alcohol was to be allowed under any circumstances. However, this would not have prevented some of the students from leaving the party and going off on their own to drink and smoke, and anyone who had left the party to do this would be responsible for themselves and their own welfare. And the organizers had clearly stated this. If they were to leave the party to drink and smoke, then they would not be allowed back into the party. Students of both schools generally got along with each other. There was great camaraderie and competition among students of both schools, but, as to be expected, there are some who were classified as bullies, troublemakers, and mischief makers. There were some who had been heard saying that they would be giving partygoers a surprise to remember. Both Ryan Halliday and Kirsten Seaman were going off to prestigious colleges, and both had secured lucrative scholarships. Ryan's was a combined football and academic scholarship, and Kirsten's was a pre-med scholarship. Ryan and Kirsten were both from lower middle-class families, and so these scholarships meant everything to them. Their parents would never have been able to afford to send them to these prestigious colleges. Ryan had recently bought a second-hand motorcycle from a garage in the town. Once or twice, Ryan had to ask his friends to help him fix it because he could not manage it on his own. Because he was still relatively new to the world of motorcycles, and he was still learning how to ride it properly. Now, witnesses had said that he was supposed to have taken Kirsten for a special ride on his motorcycle on this fateful night. And he had planned to do it after the big party, and he had made no secret as to where he would be taking Kirsten for their motorcycle ride. Thus, Ryan's motorcycle ride was common knowledge. There was someone who was extremely envious and angry that Ryan had won his scholarship. They felt that they should have won it instead of Ryan. And some had overheard this kid saying that they would do anything to stop Ryan from going off to college. This kid had been considered to be a playground bully, and they had usually used their family's money to get whatever they wanted. They had been overheard boasting to their friends that they knew how to stop Ryan from getting his scholarship. In fact, there was a hefty dare out for this person to succeed, and a betting pool had been established among some of the students. Some of the richer kids had become involved in this scheme, some for sport and some out of curiosity. This kid had felt that only the richer kids should have gotten scholarships and not the poorer ones. This kid's family had owned a huge motorcycle dealership, and he was no stranger to the world of motorcycles. There was another kid who had envied Ryan and Kirsten because they had done everything to get Kirsten to go out with them, but she had chosen Ryan instead. They had also been considered to be a playground bully, and they were usually able to get their way with girls, and they had used their good looks and family's money to do exactly this. Some people or some of the students had said that one day this kid had come on to Kirsten and that she had slapped him in front of his friends. This kid had lost their temper and had tried to slap Kirsten in return, but they had been stopped by their friends. And after this, they had become the laughing stock of their peers. This kid had not forgotten about this humiliation and had vowed to their friends that they would make Kirsten pay for this. This kid also came from a very rich family and was also no stranger to motorcycles, because riding motorcycles was their favorite hobby. And then there was another kid who had been terribly upset when Ryan Halliday had received his scholarship. This kid had come from a similar financial background to Ryan, and he had been really counting on receiving this scholarship because their family could not have afforded to send them to college. Ryan had beaten this kid out for the scholarship, but not by too many marks. And this kid had become extremely resentful toward Ryan and even Kirsten. They envied Ryan not for just having gotten the scholarship, but also for dating Kirsten, because they had had a crush on her. And this kid had also confided to some of their friends that they would try to stop Ryan from taking his scholarship. My goodness, what do we have here? We have teenage rage and teenage anger and teenage bullying. Let's go on to see who the suspects are as identified by our chip. Frank Harding, a classmate of Ryan's from a very rich family. Eddie Rockwell, also a classmate and also from a very rich family. And Pete Cosner, a classmate from a similar financial background to Ryan. According to Dr. Nicholas Gasquet, the cause of death was as follows. Both Ryan Halliday and Kirsten Seaman had died from broken necks. Their bodies had been found about 5 hours after they had died, and they had both died agonizing deaths. Ryan may have died before Kirsten, but it is possible that they could have died within minutes of each other. They had died holding hands. According to Nicholas, he's saying that this is how he feels it could have been done. There were two possible circumstances to be considered. It could have been a terrible accident, or maybe, and just maybe, a tampering with the motorcycle. And if the case was the latter, then someone could have tampered with the brakes. Someone who knew that Ryan was going to ride his motorcycle that night, and someone who knew about motorcycles. Now, let's go and do a little summary so that, we keep everybody on track and, up to date. All right? The crime scene is one where two bodies have been found. The crowd is a very silent one. They are in shock as the cops arrive. The cops ask them to step back, and they do. Some of the kids or the students in the crowd seem to know who these two dead youngsters are. Some are crying, and some parents are holding on to their kids because I guess they're scared. Right. The location is that these two bodies have been found on a grassy bank. And now there was a big party that had been going on, and the two victims were there as part of the party goers. So there you have the crime scene, the location, the occasion, and their reason for being there. The profile of the suspect, as Dr. Shea has stated, is as follows. The suspect may have wanted revenge of some sort of jealousy, but did they intend to go this far? Did they have or intend to have it end in murder? Or did they just want to teach the victims a lesson? The suspects: Frank Harding, a classmate from a rich family; Eddie Rockwell, also a classmate from a very rich family; and Pete Cosner, and he is a classmate from a similar financial background to Ryan. Alex has some very important questions which I think you should consider before moving on to try and solve this mystery. Which of the suspects could have had the greatest motive? Which of the suspects could have had the skills and resources to have done it? Was this an accident? Or was it a murder? Could the motorcycle have been tampered with? Or was it flawed after all? Did the victims sustain their broken necks due to their fall? Or maybe by another means? Very important questions to think about. Let's move on. And I'm going to give you the description once more to sort of keep you again on track. You may think it's a bit repetitious, but I like to keep my listeners on track so that they know what's going on. It was a wonderful time of the year. Exams were over and summer was here. Everyone was in such a joyous mood, and the carefree days were here, and it was time to party. Almost everyone knew that this would probably be the last time that class of 2004 would have a chance to be together. The prom would be taking place in a few days. Oh boy, excitement all around. But no one could have foreseen the terrible event that took place before the actual prom. Even today, those close to the event still wonder why this had to happen. You know what the crime scene is? You know who the suspects are? And they're Frank Harding. He's a classmate from a rich family. Eddie Rockwell, also a classmate from a rich family. And Pete Cosner. He is a classmate with a similar financial background to Ryan. You know the important questions? Which of the suspects could have had the greatest motive? And which of the suspects could have had the skills and resources to have done it? Was this an accident or a murder? Could the motorcycle have been tampered with? Or was it flawed after all? Did the victims sustain their broken necks due to their falls? Or maybe by another means? The gathering of evidence is always a very important part of solving a crime. And I like this section because the gathering of evidence is where additional information can be gleaned, and it goes into helping to solve the mystery. So let's move on. Alright, gathering of the evidence as presented to us by Dr. Ryan. All of the witnesses' statements with regard to the suspects were confirmed. The three suspects all knew each other, and on the night of the party, all three suspects were there. The motorcycle was found to have had some faults. The brakes had been tampered with and had been disabled. Ryan Halliday and Kirsten Seaman had indeed died of broken necks, and they had been thrown from Ryan's motorcycle. Their wallets and IDs were missing, but that's not unusual. Now, Chip has given us a bit more about each of the suspects. Frank Harding was the son of a wealthy motorcycle dealership owner. Frank Sr. and his family were all from a fairly wealthy family. Frank Jr. loved to hang out at his family's business, along with his two older brothers, and took a special interest in learning how to repair motorcycles. Frank Jr. was a playground bully, and a very vindictive one at that. He was rough and he was tough, and he prided himself on always being able to get his own way. He used his money to buy favors at his school, and he had become quite good in the martial arts. Eddie Rockwell was also from a fairly rich family. But a few years ago, his mom had died in a car accident, and now Eddie and his twin sister Erin were left in the care of their dad. Eddie's dad was often away on business, and he had left his kids in the care of nannies whenever he went away. Eddie had begun to stray after his mom's death, and had soon turned into a playground bully. He used his good looks and money to attract the girls, and for the most part it had worked, except for Kirsten. Eddie had had a very short fuse and was always getting into trouble. He seemed to have had a knack for leading small gangs of boys to cause mischief and disturbances in the area. In recent times, Eddie had taken a great interest in motorcycles, learning how to fix them, and had even embarked on his own motorcycle project after school. He had embarked on an initiative to build his own motorcycle. Pete Cosner had been the son of a single mom. He had two younger sisters, and overnight he had seemed to become the man of the house after his dad had been killed in a robbery at their small corner store. Pete was a very good student and had worked extremely hard at school. He was quiet and somewhat shy, and had kept mostly to himself. But due to his small size, there were many who had often picked on him at school. Pete had been determined to procure a scholarship at all cost. He wanted to be a doctor so that he could help others and help his mom and sisters to climb out of poverty. Over the last few months, Pete had been taking karate lessons at a neighborhood community center in order to strengthen and develop his muscles, and to help him become better able to defend himself against others. He had grown tired of being pushed around, and he had been determined to change this. Now, according to Alex, this is what he thinks as with regard to Through the Eyes of a Killer. The killer probably decided to commit their crime using the school's party to commit the crime. They had planned it all very carefully and had used their skills and motivation to drive them to do it. They did not really have too much difficulty accomplishing their objective, as they knew what their victims were planning to do after the party, that being for Ryan to take Kirsten for a motorcycle ride on his motorcycle. They would tamper with and disable the brakes on the motorcycle, making them unworkable and useless. They knew where Ryan would be going, and the rest was very easy. Well, let me go now to the arrest. The supper hour in most homes in this neighborhood was just beginning when the cops came for the suspect. The evening was a typical early August one. The sun was still high in the sky, and the air was warm and sticky. There seemed to be a slight hint of approaching rain, and the suspect was arrested at their home while having supper. Those around were shocked and unbelieving. Well, can you guess who was arrested? Was it Frank Harding, the rich kid who knew about motorcycles and who was versed in martial arts and who used his money at school to buy favors? Was it Eddie Rockwell, the kid with the short fuse who had used his money and good looks to attract the girls and who had become interested in motorcycles, building his own after school? Was it Pete Cosner, the kid of poor financial background who was driven to win a scholarship at any cost so as to improve his status in life and to help others, who had taken up in karate in order to protect himself? I wonder who it is. Maybe you know. But let's soldier on and let's go to court, folks. We're ready to go to court? In front of a packed room that was made up of friends and teachers of the murdered couple, family members, and local media, the prosecution proffered the following. The suspect had known all about the planned ride by Ryan Halliday, had tampered with the brakes on the motorcycle beforehand. They had gone to the party on that fateful night, knowing full well what would happen to Ryan and Kirsten. They had known that Ryan's motorcycle route would include having to drive around a steep corner, and it would be difficult, if not almost impossible, to control the motorcycle around this corner without the aid of brakes. They also knew that there was a light pole just after the corner, and that without any brakes on the motorcycle, Ryan would have been sure to crash. The prosecution then said that there was a chance that the suspect may not have wanted to cause death to the victims, but that all they had probably wanted was to have caused some type of bodily harm. The prosecution asked the jury to bring back a verdict of manslaughter, and the defendant proffered the following. He was not guilty because he didn't do it. This is a typical defense by most defendants. Not guilty because they didn't do it. Yes, they had been very angry at the victims, but they had never contemplated going to such lengths. They did not have the skills that were needed to have been able to disable the brakes on Ryan's motorcycle. The defense also asked the following question. How did the victims really die? Was it as a result of the fall from the motorcycle? Or maybe they could have been attacked and murdered? After they had been thrown from Ryan's motorcycle? That's a very interesting question. And they could have been robbed as they lay unconscious and then killed? Where were the wallets and IDs of these two young people? And why were they missing? Where were they now? Why had they not been found? They must have had their wallets and IDs on them at the time, as they had required them to attend the party. Students had to show IDs in order to gain entry to the party. Well, in the minds of the jury, according to Alex, the jury had to deal with some very important questions that were raised by the defense. Did the victims die as a result of the fall from the motorcycle? Or were they murdered after they had fallen? Why had the cops not been able to find the wallets and IDs of the victims? And where were they now? Could robbery and murder have occurred after the victims had been thrown from the motorcycle? When the victims could have been lying unconscious? Very interesting questions for the jury to consider. Murder after robbery? Murder by a suspect? What could it be? Well, outside the court, there was a big debate going on. The questions raised by the defense were hotly debated outside of the court. The general opinion was that a verdict of not guilty should be rendered. The prosecution did not really prove how the victims had died. Yes, they had both died of broken necks, but was it really due to the fall from the motorcycle? Or were they robbed and killed as they lay unconscious? Well, my team took a straw poll, and a unanimous, not decision, but a unanimous feeling of not guilty was circulating among the crowd. And the crowd was calling for the jury to bring back a verdict of not guilty. Well, the verdict. This time, the jury's verdict concurred with what the crowd was calling for outside of the court. So opinions matched the verdict. Not guilty. A unanimous decision by reason of doubt. There was not enough evidence to find the suspect guilty. So, after all I've told you here, who do you think the real killer was? It was young Pete Cosner, who had actually committed these sad and unfortunate murders. But there's a sinister twist to this crime. Pete had had help from one of his classmates. Well, let's go to the wrap-up. Pete Cosner had broken the necks of the unconscious victims after they had been thrown from Ryan's motorcycle. And as they had lain in a semi-conscious state, Pete had done the deed. Pete had been approached by Frank to help carry out this gruesome crime. And it was Frank who had tampered with Ryan's motorcycle before that night. He had been very familiar with the route that Ryan was going to take that night, and he had known how to disable the brakes without much difficulty. Frank had approached Pete to help finish off the victims because he knew that a fall from the motorcycle would not have killed them. He knew that they would have fallen, given the circumstances, but he also knew that they would have been thrown onto the grass, and this would not have been enough to kill them. Frank had offered Pete a large sum of money to do the deed, knowing Pete's financial circumstances, and young Pete would not have resisted the money. Frank had withdrawn $10,000 from his personal account, unknown to his parents, and had offered it to Pete as payment. He also knew that Pete would have been able to do it, given his karate skills. Pete and Frank had watched the motorcycle crash and stood as both victims and watched as both victims had been thrown onto the grass. They had watched as Ryan had first tried to help Kirsten and had witnessed both victims struggling. They watched as Ryan had taken Kirsten's hand in his, and then they had waited until they were sure that both Ryan and Kirsten were dead. Or they had waited until they were both unconscious, and then Pete had approached quietly, and with a karate chop to each victim, he had killed them both. Frank had then scooped both wallets and IDs, and then the pair had disappeared into the night. It was a very remorseful and devastated Pete who had confessed everything. That's it, folks. This is the end of the motorcycle murder. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have enjoyed bringing it to you. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this particular episode. And I welcome you to return again and listen to other shows. You have a great day, a great week, and take care of yourselves. Bye for now.